woman just screamed like someone lit her Louis Vuitton yoga mat on fire. And honestly, that was the sound of justice. Karen's son's ATV charger exploded in a burst of blue sparks because she thought siphoning power from an electrical engineer was just borrowing a little juice. She crossed a fence, a circuit, and the last nerve of a very patient man. And when the HOA backed her, let's just say they lit the match, and I rewired the fuse. There was a pop, a flash, and then the kind of scream you only hear in haunted houses or during Black Friday fights at Walmart. It wasn't a ghost or a sale. It was my neighbor. Bless her over-tweezed eyebrows, screeching like her overpriced yoga mat just caught fire. Technically, it wasn't her. Technically, it was her son's souped-up electric ATV, now smoking like it had just seen the face of God. And technically, she had it coming. You don't siphon electricity from a systems engineer and expect to walk away with just a smug smile and a mimosa. Especially not after I warned her, not after the HOA ignored me, and definitely not after she laughed and said, "It's just a little juice. Lighten up." Oh, I lightened up all right. I lit up her backyard like a 4th of July cookout. Except only fireworks were her son's charger exploding and my revenge plan quietly reaching phase 2. But let's rewind a bit. Because this showdown didn't start with sparks, it started with a blip. A tiny, irregular, painfully suspicious blip on my home energy monitor. See, I'm not your average suburban hermit. I'm a systems engineer who designs power grids for a living. My love language is kilowatt hours and thermal load balancing. I monitor my solar inverters like other people check their dating apps, obsessively and with unhealthy enthusiasm. So when I notice consistent power dips at exactly 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock a.m. EMM for 3 nights straight, my eyebrow went up. And when I saw that 1.8 kW had vanished into the ether without explanation, I didn't call the utility company. I grabbed my multimeter and started hunting. At first, I thought it was my hot tub, maybe a glitchy cycling pattern, then maybe my water heater or the freezer in the garage. But no, I did a full diagnostic scan and everything checked out. It wasn't me. It was something or someone drawing power from outside the system. And I knew exactly who had the audacity to treat my backyard like a public charging station. Her. Now let me introduce you to Karen. Not a Karen, the Karen. If entitlement had a mascot, it'd be her. In pastel yoga pants and designer flip-flops. Moved in 2 years ago after a messy divorce that apparently also separated her from her common sense. Ever since then, she's been on a one-woman crusade to turn our quiet neighborhood into a dictatorship with lavender-scented HOA rules and unauthorized decorative shrub height audits. She once yelled at a 10-year-old for riding his bike too joyfully near her begonias. But her latest obsession? A Mat 3-acre electric ATV for her teenage son. Loud, flashy, and most annoyingly hungry for electricity. I spotted the extension cord while trimming my hedge. Orange, fat, snaking over the fence like it had just slithered out of a frat party. It ran from the back of her garage and disappeared, no joke, behind my tool shed. I stared at it for a full minute like a man watching his privacy commit suicide. I don't even have outlets back there. At least I didn't think I did. Unless, no way she was that bold. That night, I flipped off all the exterior breakers except one. The next morning, power dip, 2:12 a.m. Right on time, I stepped outside, walked the perimeter, and sure enough, the cord was gone, retracted, hidden, like a crime scene scrubbed clean. But not before I got pictures, time-stamped, geotagged, stored in 3 cloud backups. I was raised by a lawyer and trained as an engineer. You bet I had receipts. The next day, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe her son plugged into the wrong outlet. Maybe they thought it was communal. Maybe she was just terminally clueless. I walked over, rang the doorbell, and waited. She answered in sunglasses so big they looked like space goggles and holding a mimosa like it was a microphone. "Oh, that," she said, with the breezy condescension of a woman who once tried to fine someone for hanging laundry too cheerfully. "We figure it was fine. You got solar right. You won't even notice." Noticed. I also noticed she didn't ask, and that's where she messed up. because she didn't just steal electricity. She stole honor. She insulted the sacred code of engineers everywhere. And in that moment, I smiled the smile of a man who'd just found his reason, not for rage, for revenge. I didn't confront her again. That would have been inefficient. I went into blueprint mode, like I was prepping a backup grid for a hospital in hurricane season. See, you don't mess with a man whose idea of fun is building off-grid fail-safes and calibrating impedance loops for leisure. I didn't want just any revenge. I wanted a calibrated, legally bulletproof, HOA-proof, and karma-saturated masterpiece. That night, I built my first trap. It was beautiful. Looked like an ordinary outlet, a little weather-worn, lazily attached to the side of my tool shed, had just the right angle to whisper, "I'm vulnerable." Inside, a custom-built impedance circuit designed to fry anything drawing more than 3 AUMs. Completely safe for pets, humans, and even the occasional raccoon. But for an ATV charger, let's just say it was about to meet its maker. And that maker was me, holding a thermos of chamomile tea and smiling like a Bond villain in cargo shorts. Thinks later, the cord returned, like clockwork. Like Karen's smugness had its own calendar alert. I watched from my office window, 2:12 a.m. power dip, exactly as predicted. Then came the moment. Flash, pop, glorious chaos, I swear. The shriek that followed could have cracked glass. It was art. The next morning, Karen was pacing her backyard like a flamingo on meth, phone in one hand, fury in the other. Her son stood beside the ATV, now covered with a tarp that screamed crime scene more than casual damage. I sipped my coffee at the kitchen window like I was watching a soap opera that finally got good. Then came the HOA letter, a full-page warning, printed in Times New Roman, because of course it was, accusing me of creating hostile neighbor dynamics and tampering with communal boundaries. Apparently, Karen had told them I was installing dangerous modifications to shared infrastructure. Shared, as if my backyard was a public park, as if my power outlets were some kind of benevolent gift to the community. It was laughable and infuriating. They didn't ask for proof, didn't come inspect, just copy-pasted whatever she reported and mailed it like gospel. But here's the thing. When you go after an engineer with a grudge and a personal server rack, you'd better expect escalation. I upgraded the decoy, doubled the circuit protection, added a motion sensor trigger, and, because I'm petty, installed a hidden Raspberry Pi that logged every plug-in attempt in real time and pinged my phone. I also mounted a birdhouse camera facing the fence. Karen wouldn't know it, but the next time she leased power, I'd have timestamps, footage, voltage graphs, and a digital footprint her HOA buddies couldn't ignore. And I didn't stop there. I ran a decoy extension cord over the fence, just slightly exposed, like I'd forgotten to clean up after yard work. Inside, it was rigged with a current tripper designed to fry anything even thinking about being an ATV charger. I made it all look careless, vulnerable, like I was just a dumb guy who forgot to lock his power box. But what I'd built was a spring-loaded, documentation-backed, HOA legal, electrified mousetrap. 4 days passed, no activity. I almost thought they'd learned their lesson. Maybe the ATV charger died a smoky, dramatic death and they moved on. Maybe Karen decided her HOA throne wasn't worth another meltdown. Then came night 5. My phone pinged, power draw detected, 2.6 QHW external, surge trigger armed. I watched live from my desk. The cord twitched. The birdhouse camera caught a soft flash. The ATV let out a defeated whine, like a robot sobbing into the void. Karen's son jumped back. Now the poster child for natural selection. I nearly applauded. That wasn't a trap. That was justice with schematics. But I wasn't done. Because this time, I had something I didn't have before. Proof. And I was about to make that HOA eat every last watt of it. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee halfway through a crossword when my phone buzzed. Motion detected birdhouse cam 2. I clicked the feed and nearly snorted espresso out my nose. There she was, Karen's teenage son, a.k.a. Prince of Extension Cords, tiptoeing through my flower bed like a clumsy ninja. He squatted near the dummy outlet, my glorious, perfectly rigged decoy, and plugged in a fresh orange cord like he was defusing a bomb. A second later, he bolted back over the fence, mission accomplished, presumably thinking he'd once again bested the neighborhood nerd. 5 minutes later, the system pinged, surge triggered, voltage spike delivered. My monitor lit up like Times Square, and I watched the screen with the satisfaction of a man who'd just set a mousetrap and caught a rat wearing Gucci slides. This time, I didn't even flinch when I heard the yelp, a loud crack, a distant thud, and then, just barely audible through the fence, Karen screeching, "I knew it! He's trying to kill us!" Now, I'm no lawyer, but I'm fairly certain that designing a safety-rated, perfectly legal trap that fries equipment but not humans does not constitute attempted murder. But I still called my buddy at the utility office and had him swing by, just in case she tried to escalate. He came over, ate half my donuts, and laughed so hard at the setup, he asked if he could use it in his next training presentation. By lunchtime, Karen was back in full dramatic peacock mode, phone glued to her ear, pacing her backyard in furious little circles, gesturing toward my property like it owed her rent. I ignored her and got back to upgrading my motion stringer decoy system, but not before I installed a small speaker inside the garden gnome near the fence. Why? Because next time she came sniffing around, I wanted to greet her properly. I programmed it to say one thing: smile, you're on candid camera. That night, it rained, a slow, steady drizzle that made everything feel oddly peaceful. Until 1:47 a.m., that's when my phone lit up again. Motion, power draw, surge tripped. Then a notification from GnomeCam. Audio trigger activated. I opened the feed just in time to catch Karen herself in a plastic poncho and slippers yanking on the decoy cord. The outlet sparked. The gnome cheerfully chirped its catchphrase, and Karen screamed so loud a neighborhood dog started howling in solidarity. The next morning, HOA Karen filed a complaint against me again. This time, the form she dropped off at the HOA office was 3 pages long and included the phrases electrical terrorism, psychological warfare, and gnome intimidation. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so insane. Actually, no, it was still hilarious. The HOA rep Janice called me personally and whispered, "You didn't actually booby-trap your yard with a talking gnome, right?" To which I replied, "Janice, I believe in passive deterrence and seasonal whimsy." But the real twist? Karen didn't stop there. No, she rallied 2 other neighbors, people who never made eye contact before, and suddenly I was the villain of the cul-de-sac. According to her flyer, I was a techno-bully hoarding solar power and abusing circuitry to silence dissent. She actually used those words. I've seen less dramatic manifestos in conspiracy forums. The flyer ended with a line that made me genuinely cackle. "He may have the electricity, but we have the light. Oh, Karen, you should have stuck with mimosa brunches." Karen didn't just double down. She went full suburban warfare mode. The day after the second Charger fried, a freshly printed flyer appeared in everyone's mailbox, complete with stock images of injured squirrels, a warning about electrical terrorism, and a call to protect our children from neighborhood hazards. I hadn't even known there were kids on this block. Karen's definition of our children apparently included her 17-year-old son, who spent most of his time vaping next to the garage and shouting at Fortnite. Later that afternoon, the HOA sent a letter, not to Karen, but to me, hand-delivered, gold foil stamp, very serious. It accused me of creating unsafe conditions that threaten community morale. Community morale. Like I'd zapped their HOA spirit animal or something. And because the HOA president, Greg the Beige, had the spine of a breadstick, he signed off on it like it was a declaration of war. Naturally, I called their bluff. I walked right into the HOA office and handed over a folder thicker than Karen's eyelash extensions. Logs, photos, timestamp footage, schematics. I even included a copy of my engineering license just for fun. The lady at the front desk, Janice, with her battle-worn cardigan and a soul slowly withering from years of HOA drama, looked through it, sighed like I just handed her a dissertation, and muttered, "She's really doing this again?" Yes, she was. By 3 p.m. that day, a safety inspector arrived at my house. Bright orange vest, clipboard, hard hat 2 sizes too big, and an expression that screamed, "I hate my job." He walked around, peeked at my outlets like they were wild animals, and made a few fake notes before asking, So you really built a surge loop just for an ATV charger? I nodded. You ever build one that fries karaoke machines too? Yes, I smiled. Working on it. He left laughing. The HOA, however, wasn't laughing. Their next move? A mandatory emergency board meeting. Closed session, no witnesses, no non-members. Karen, of course, strutted in like it was her coronation. Clipboard in hand, outfit aggressively floral, sunglasses on, indoors. Her son trailed behind her like a lost intern. That night, I got an anonymous tip. A neighbor, let's call him Steve, slipped me a manila envelope with grainy photos, extension cords running from Karen's house into multiple properties, including his. One even curled under a shrub into the backyard of a couple who were out of town for a month. Karen had created an underground energy grid. Move over, Elon Musk. We got the Karen grid. Team, not I. Call Steve. We met behind the garden center at Lowe's like we were in some low-budget spy thriller. He brought more evidence and a receipt for a fridge motor that had burned out. We compared timestamps that matched exactly with one of Karen's infamous Friday night wine and wine karaoke parties. This was no longer neighborly theft. This was a power cartel, a covert suburban energy empire powered by other people's outlets. But I wasn't going to blow it all yet. Not just yet. No, it needed to go big, and that meant building a case so airtight even Greg the Beige couldn't wiggle through. The time had come to bring in the others, the quiet ones, the ones who'd laughed off the flickering porch lights and the mysteriously high power bills. And trust me, once they heard what we found, they weren't laughing anymore. The night after Karen's second charter went poof was unusually quiet, eerily so. No ATV revving, no wine-fueled karaoke, just the hum of my server quietly logging every watt like a digital diary of petty justice. By morning, I had 3 new emails. One from Janice at the HOA, subject line, further review, ongoing. One from a neighbor I barely knew, subject line, did she steal my power too? And one from my smart system that simply read, activity detected, Zone C. Zone C was the corner by my shed, where I'd planted a fake outlet behind a garden gnome with a GoPro in its hat. So I pulled up the footage. There it was, 2:04, AM&A lanky teenager, hoodie up, creeping along the fence line like he was auditioning for a low-budget heist movie. He glanced around, unspooled the same orange extension cord, and plugged it in. Again. No hesitation, no guilt, just business as usual. That's when I knew. This wasn't carelessness, it was confidence. Karen had created an entire system, a shadow grid of suburban theft, engineered by entitlement and powered by audacity. And her son, just the errand boy, a pawn in yoga pants suburban empire. I sent the new footage to Janice, no subject line, just a video file named Repeat Behavior, time-stamped. That got her attention, but here's the mini twist. I wasn't the only target. Turns out I was just the first to notice. Over the next few days, neighbors started coming out of the woodwork. Tom from 2 doors down asked if I could help him check something. His outdoor fridge had stopped working twice. Nancy, the quiet woman with a gnome collection, mentioned her fairy lights kept flickering like they were haunted. And the Patels, their walk-in freezer had defrosted mid-week, ruining an entire batch of wedding catering. It didn't take long before the pattern clicks. One neighbor's outlet here, another's garden socket there. Karen's son, sneaking around under the cover of darkness, dressed like a discount ninja with an extension cord in hand. She wasn't just stealing power, she was draining goodwill, one backyard at a time. So we formed a group chat, just a few of us at first. Tom called it Shocked by Karen. Within 48 hours, we had 15 members. That's when I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was about to become a community event. By the time Karen's second charger had gone up in a puff of righteous smoke, I figured she'd do what any logical person would do, stop stealing. But logic, as I've learned, is Karen resistant. Instead of retreating quietly into a shame spiral, she retaliated with a drone. Yes, a buzzing, blinking, camera-mount mini helicopter that looked like it came free with a conspiracy theory starter pack. It hovered over my backyard like a hummingbird with a superiority complex. scanning my property like it was auditioning for CSI Suburbia. The first time I saw it, I waved. The second time, I mooned it. The third time, it crashed into my bird feeder and spun itself into a pile of shame and propeller shards. I left it there, like a fallen soldier in the war on common sense. But of course, Karen claimed I attacked it, sent a letter to the HOA claiming I had aggressively weaponized my garden decor. The HOA sent a rep to investigate my bird feeder. I offered him some seed. At this point, I knew escalation was inevitable. She wouldn't stop until she turned this block into a passive-aggressive battle zone and me into her designated villain. I needed allies, so I did what any suburbanite turned vigilante would do. I hosted a barbecue. It wasn't just for burgers. It was a recruitment drive. Neighbors trickled in. Tom from 2 houses down brought ribs and 3 months of pent-up HOA fury. Nancy brought her famous potato salad and stories of her flickering garden lights that apparently weren't caused by bad wiring, but by some brat plugging in a bounce house. The Patels, bless them, rolled in with enough samosas to feed an uprising. Over grilled meat and shared grievances, we talked, compared stories, connected dots. One neighbor even produced a log showing their power bills had jumped ever since Karen's son started wearing noise-canceling headphones and rollerblading past their shed. That night, we formed a group chat, named it Shocked by Karen. Membership, 8 houses by dawn, 20 by the weekend. And suddenly, the quiet street wasn't so quiet anymore. It was humming with petty resistance and collective payback potential. It was time for phase 2. And no, I didn't call it that out loud. I called it neighborhood optimization. Because apparently subtle revenge is more palatable when it sounds like a TED Talk. First step, outlets. I helped Nancy install tamper-proof outdoor boxes, taught Tom how to run voltage logs through his home server. Even the Patels let me rig up a deco power cord that looked real enough to fool a raccoon, and definitely fool a Karen. And then we waited. Cameras hidden in gnomes, sensors under planters, lawn ornaments that doubled as surveillance hubs. You'd have thought we were prepping for a Cold War. And in a way, we were. And just as the paranoia began to fade, Karen struck again, or tried to. But this time we had eyes, logs, time-stamped footage. A literal Google Drive folder titled Karen's Greatest Hits. When she snuck her orange extension cord across the fence for the 3rd time, she didn't just trip my trap. She activated a whole neighborhood. But you'll want to stay tuned for that part, because when justice arrives by USB drive and public shaming at the HOA clubhouse, ooh, it's delicious. The moment the HOA received our evidence packet, which, by the way, included timestamps, surveillance stills, and an actual PowerPoint titled Karen's Neighborhood Parasite Grid, they didn't call a meeting. They called a crisis session. Suddenly, the same people who once scolded us for failing to maintain festive mailbox flags were frantically whispering behind closed doors like they were dealing with a national security leak. And in a way, they were, because Karen wasn't just a rogue resident. She was a rogue system. The neighborhood's power drain was no longer a mystery. It was a full-blown utility Cold War, and the HOA was smack in the middle of it. At the emergency meeting, Greg, the HOA president, who usually looked like a Labrador in khakis, could barely keep his hands from shaking. He opened the session with, "We've received some concerning reports," which was HOA speak for, "We are so incredibly screwed." I sat there with my arms crossed, watching the pastel-clad board members shift in their seats as the screenshots were projected onto the clubhouse wall like some kind of HOA courtroom drama. Karen, red-faced and visibly unhinged, tried to pass it off as friendly borrowing. The word theft never crossed her lips. It hovered. Then came the mic drop. Tom stood up, holding his utility bill like it was Exhibit A in a high-stakes trial. "That spike in usage," he said, jabbing at the paper, "that's not my margarita machine. That's Karen's karaoke kingdom, leeching my electricity every Friday night." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone gasped. Karen tried to laugh. "It's just a few kilowatts," she said. "Why are we acting like I burned down a school?" And there it was. The mini hook in real time. That absurd tone-deaf line that would echo through the neighborhood group chat for weeks. Just a few kilowatts. Memes were born before the meeting even ended. Then Nancy dropped the bombshell. She pulled out her phone and hit play. Audio recording. Karen's voice from a week earlier, bragging during a backyard brunch. Honestly, with what I pay in dues, this place owes me power. The room went silent. Greg turned a shade paler than usual. The HOA secretary quietly crossed herself like she'd just witnessed a curse. Someone's toddler started crying. It was beautiful. Karen stormed out before the vote, but it didn't matter. By the end of the session, the board had passed 3 emergency motions, one to suspend Karen's voting rights, one to install lockable outlet covers in all common areas, and one to begin formal proceedings to fine her for over $1,800, 0 cents in unauthorized power usage. But that wasn't the victory. Not yet. Because 2 days later, a letter arrived. Official seal. City Energy Department. Karen was being investigated for third-degree utility fraud. Turns out when you steal enough kilowatt hours to power a food truck for a month, it stops being quirky HOA drama and starts being a criminal offense. And you know what the best part was? She still didn't get it. She posted on Nextdoor about being targeted by jealous neighbors and claimed we were manufacturing evidence with AI. Someone replied with a GIF of her son plugging in the extension cord, and she went radio silent after that. But something was building, not just justice, payback. And the next move wouldn't be hers. Karen's house, once the unofficial HOA headquarters of condescension and clipped hedges, now looked like a bad Airbnb listing. Half-lit porch, tarp over where the ATV used to be, and a wilted wreath that seemed to scream, "Please forget I exist." But while she buried her chaos under garden gnomes and passive-aggressive wind chimes, the neighborhood was thriving. People waved again. Kids played in driveways without being yelled at for disturbing the mulch. And me? I was back to monitoring the solar output with a cup of iced tea and a quiet grin. Until one day the mail brought a final letter. A stamped, city-issued document declaring that Karen owed $1,892.47 in utility back pay, subject to collections if unpaid. I framed it not out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but as a reminder that sometimes the system actually works, especially when it's prodded by an engineer with surveillance-grade pettiness and a surge circuit. Then came the HOA election. With Greg stepping down and several board members resigning amid stress complications, the community actually got involved for the first time in years. Gwen, a retired firefighter with zero patience for nonsense, was voted in as president with a campaign slogan that read, "We're not a cult, we're a neighborhood." Beautiful. I declined the nomination to join the board. I'd had enough fluorescent lit drama to last a lifetime, but agreed to help rewrite the bylaws. The new draft included a section titled Unauthorized Power Access. Don't. It passed unanimously. As for Karen, she kept to herself. No more parties, no more iced lattes and monogram cups, just her, the gnomes, and what looked like a solar-powered fountain that hadn't worked since installation. But one Saturday morning, as I was adjusting my grid setup, I saw her standing near the property line. No sunglasses, no clipboard, just her and a hesitant look. She didn't step over, didn't speak, just stood there for a minute, staring at the outlet that had once ruined her backyard dreams. Then she turned and walked away. It wasn't an apology, but it was quieter, which, coming from Karen, was historic. The kicker? Her kid, formerly the prince of the cul-de-sac, showed up at my door a week later with a screwdriver and a question, "Hey, can you show me how to build one of those fake outlets?" I blinked. "Why?" He shrugged. "I want to prank my cousin." I paused, then smiled. "Grab a notepad." That was the moment I knew we'd won. Not just the HOA nonsense or the utility war, but something bigger. We'd rewired the neighborhood. People talked now, shared tools, laughed. One guy even started a group called Solar Squad, which is 50% about green energy and 50% about mocking Karen's failed karaoke empire. I joined, and the outlet, still there, still rigged, still waiting. Not because I expect another leech to slither across the fence, but because some symbols shouldn't be erased. They should be maintained, like a warning or a badge. One afternoon, someone asked if I'd ever forgive Karen. I told him I already had. But that didn't mean I was going to uninstall the security camera disguised as a bird feeder, because sometimes the best revenge isn't shocking someone, it's making sure they know you could do it again anytime. Some people think boundaries are just fences and wires, but sometimes boundaries are built from patience, data logs, and an unhealthy amount of spite. This wasn't just about a stolen charge. It was about someone thinking your piece is theirs to plug into. And maybe the real voltage was the friends we made along the way. So next time someone laughs and says, it's just a little juice, remember, the grid remembers. Thanks for sticking through this petty-powered saga. If you've ever had to engineer your way out of HOA nonsense or want to do, smash that like button. Drop your wildest Karen moment in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, subscribe for more stories where the good guy doesn't just win, he writes the firmware. Stay clever, stay kind, and never underestimate a neighbor with a birdhouse full of cameras and a plan.